That was a bad one.
It was.
Ah, that was another bad one. There you go.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Whitney.
Right energy, a little awkward though.
Hi, my name is Whitney and I'm a registered dietitian. And today we'll be talking about my tips of how to stock your pantry, fridge, and freezer. This video in particular is going to focus just on your pantry. So it'll be a bit of a two-part series where we'll focus on your fridge and freezer for the next video. Meal planning and meal preparation is something that I work on quite often with individuals. I tend to work with people who are busy working professionals or individuals that just don't have a ton of time to cook or meal prep. So it's really important to stock your pantry and your kitchen with all those things that you need to make those quick and easy meals for those really rush types of nights or days. By having a well-stocked pantry, if you have the ability and the storage to be able to have a few of these basics, meal prep and meal planning will be so much easier and less stressful for you. Let's get started. But it can seem a little bit daunting of how to even get started to make sure that you have a pretty well-stocked pantry. The easiest way to think about it is to think about the meals that you're eating itself and having those little items in your pantry so that you have quick and easy access to them. So let's visualize what a quote unquote ideal meal or snack might look like. Let's start with what your plate might look like. You'll probably have some sort of a protein to make sure that you're staying full for a long period of time and getting all those really important nutrients and amino acids and vitamins and minerals from those protein sources. It'll likely have some sort of a carbohydrate or even some sort of a grain to give you that quick energy boost that you likely will need. It might have some sort of produce in the form of fruits or vegetables, so those really great nutrient-dense, high-fiber options. And then you're gonna have something that makes it taste good. I think about those condiments, those spices, and of course those delicious oils. And then if we're not thinking so much about those meals, there's gonna be a few of those miscellaneous items. Things like beverages that you enjoy. And if you're somebody like me who absolutely loves to bake, some of those little baking miscellaneous items, but those are more optional. Carbohydrates. Like I mentioned earlier, carbohydrates is a great source of energy. Often carbohydrates tends to have a bit of a bad rap, especially in the media. But what I really focus on is the types of carbohydrates people are consuming and the amount that they're eating. So if we think about the meals that we're having, it's roughly about a quarter of what our meal is being some sort of a carbohydrate source. But I think the really important thing is making sure that it does have a source of fiber in it. So some of those whole grain options are great. Something that tends to be in most individuals' pantries are some sort of a pasta. Pasta is a really quick cooking carbohydrate. Usually takes between, 8 to 13 minutes to cook up. Like you can see, I have a few that I usually have in my pantry. I usually have some sort of a smaller pasta, things like macaroni or penne. Usually just having one is perfectly fine, or some sort of a longer one like spaghetti or linguine, just to add a little bit of variety into what they're eating. I can personally say I'm more of a white pasta person. This may be a little bit misleading, but in this little container I have some whole grain. But if you're trying to get some more fiber into your meals, having some of these whole grain pastas is a really great way to do it. There's also tons of lentil pastas or legume pastas that will add a source of protein to your meals along with the carbohydrate. But there's also pastas that are kind of that in between the white pasta and the whole grain. And usually it says white pasta with fiber added. So if you're wanting something in between, that's a great option too. I also happen to find this alphabet pasta in my pantry. Who knows how old it is, but that's kind of the realities of what my pantry looks like. Next up, I always have some sort of rice. So as an Indian, I have I think 10 kilogram bag of rice that is white rice in my pantry that I'm not gonna pull out because that will involve a lot of muscle mass. But I also try to have some sort of brown rice in my pantry as well. It's another kind of preference culturally where I prefer having white rice with a lot of the Indian meals I have. But I often use brown rice in some more Western types of bowls or even Mexican bowls, just to add a little bit more fiber to what I'm eating. So I like to have a mix of both, but really depending on your resources, what's in your grocery store, any financial concerns, or even space, choose rice if that's something that you really enjoy. Some other Things that people may not consider when it comes to carbohydrates are things like oats or other cereals that you might enjoy. When it comes to cereals, people usually associate that with breakfast items, but oatmeals and other kind of cereals can be easily eaten during lunch and dinner. Don't discriminate against them outside of your breakfast meal. Some others that aren't necessarily grains include things like potatoes. When it comes to potatoes, it's really based on your preference. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more quick cooking, those tiny little nugget potatoes might be your go-to, since it only takes about 15, max 20 minutes to either bake or boil. Or you could easily cut up things like these russet potatoes into smaller chunks so that they cook a little bit faster for you. Other starchy vegetables include things like yams or sweet potatoes, and those are great sources of nutrients as well as carbohydrates. I also wanted to add something a little bit less conventional for most pantries, but things like rice paper wraps, where you can basically put different vegetables and proteins in there for a super quick meal. Or even rice noodles can be one. And lastly, sometimes we just don't have the time, and you might notice that you want more of a snacky meal rather than having to put more effort into what you're eating. Things like crackers are another great option to have in your pantry for those quick situations. Those 3 different components of the carbohydrate, protein, and non-starchy vegetable is a meal in itself. So snack meals are also totally fine. And if you're in a pinch, there often are other pre-cooked grains that you can choose that you can just microwave up within a minute or 2. There's all sorts of brands. The one thing I get people just to do is take a look at the ingredients list just to see what's in it so you're aware. This is a great option since it's primarily just the different types of grains and a little bit of seasoning, but some options do have a lot of salt added. So just take a look at that before you choose them. Proteins. These are a few proteins that I have in my pantry. Like you'll notice, a lot of them are more plant-based options just because we tend to eat more plant-based when we eat out at home, but there are other animal options that you're welcome to also choose. Let's get started with some different types of nuts or seeds. I try to have a variety of nuts and seeds in our home, mainly for a source of quick and easy protein as a snack, to add to our breakfasts, but the ones that I was able to find were some walnuts. So I tend to buy a big bag of walnuts when we're over at Costco. We have some Brazil nuts here as well. Important just to only have one each day because that's quite high in selenium. But we sometimes also have things like peanuts, since Jason can have those, almonds as well. But we always have some sort of nut butters in the home as well. So this is for Jason. I can't eat peanuts, so there's some peanut butter. I have some nut and seed mixed butters in the fridge. I also have things like tahini, almond butter, just to add a bit of variety. I use that not just to slather onto bread, but I also often use that for dressings or even to be putting into different sauces to add a bit of that nutty umami flavor to it and to also thicken up the sauces as well. I also have some hemp hearts here that I often add to oatmeals or different types of breakfasts to add some more plant-based omega-3s to them. But nuts and seeds are a great way to add some healthy fats as well as proteins to your meals. When it comes to animal proteins, the main ones that we usually have are in the form of fish. I am finding a bit of a transition to eat sardines, but Jason really enjoys them, especially when I'm traveling. It's a really quick, easy protein for him to just pop open and add to his meals. So we have some sardines here that he really likes. I actually really like the ones that are packed in oil. You can use the fish, of course, as your protein, and then the oil in there kind of gets that really fishy but meaty flavor to it that you can add to salads or other meals itself. Just add a little bit of something to them. And then I didn't want to overwhelm you with the excessive amount of legumes that I have in my pantry. I might do a little bit of a sneak over to show you what mine looks like because it's absolutely ridiculous. I truly have no clue how many beans and lentils I have. It's definitely more than 10 or 15 varieties. But these are some of the ones that I tend to use most often. So I know choosing the dried ones can be a little bit labor intensive, take a little bit more time to cook. But what I often do is I have an Instant Pot, or you can just put a pot of boiling water on and cook the whole bag of the beans that you're purchasing. So this is an example, and cook it all in one go rather than doing it in small batches. And then any sort of extra beans that you have, just store in your freezer for future quick meals. But if you're in a pinch, having canned beans is also absolutely a-okay. I often always have a bunch of canned beans. That's a really quick protein that you can add to things like salads or to sandwiches. One tip that I have for canned beans is just marinating it in your favorite spices or herbs or oils that you would with any sort of animal-based protein, just to get those similar flavors. But the one that I tend to use quite often is these red lentils. They're really, really quick cooking. So I tend to make my dals or lentil soups out of them. I know my family will use other types of lentils, but I just find this so quick. I have a great recipe on my blog if you're wanting to check that one out. I'll link it over in the description. But I often get clients to add this to pasta sauces, kind of just melt in there and you wouldn't even really know that there's some extra fiber and protein. So like you can see, if you don't really have a big fridge or freezer, there's all sorts of other proteins that you can store in your pantry for quick and easy sources. Now on to the things that make our food very tasty. If you're wanting a pretty simple pantry, you really don't need much. Things like having some basic oils and some really good salt is probably the best first place to start. In my pantry, when we first moved in, the main oils I had were really olive oil, and I slowly added some avocado oil as well. But other vegetable oils are also great if that's within your affordability or what you enjoy. I like to add these two mainly because it's a source of omega-3 fatty acids. I've always grown up with olive oil, so I enjoy the taste of it. But if you're wanting something a little bit more neutral that isn't some of those other vegetable oils that can also kind of withstand a higher cooking temp, the avocado oil is a great bet. And then I usually have these two types of salts, but I actually use kosher salt for a lot of regular cooking needs. I really like the flavor of it, and with baking, especially the recipes that I really like, they often use kosher salt for it. But I also have iodized salt, simple table salt. Making sure that we're getting enough iodine in our diet is also important, especially if you're following really a plant-based diet. So I kind of go between the two depending on what I'm cooking. If you're really cooking something simple that you may not want to taste kind of that bit of iodine-y flavor from the iodized salt, you should use the kosher salt. But other things that you could be doing as you are adding to your pantry and those great foods and spices and condiments to make your foods taste really good is thinking about the different things that you're wanting to cook most often. I think about when I first moved into this place on my own with Jason, some of the things that I purchased right off the get-go were a lot of the spice mixes or spices that I often cook with that my family also really cooked with. But as I started to try different recipes and adding more flavors into my pantry, that's when I slowly started to add other flavors to it. Here's a quick shot of my ridiculous pantry. It is super disorganized, but like you can see, this is not where I started off with. This is me over the years adding different types of spices to it. Things like vinegars, balsamic vinegar, apple cider vinegar, rice wine vinegars. These are all great ways to add different flavors, as well as other condiments that you might enjoy, either from a cultural perspective or just things that you grew up with. Sauces are another one. So they can easily be some of those bottle sauces or even things like pasta sauce. So think about these main staple items that you really enjoy that you think are going to be the most bang for your buck. But if you are considering the bare basics, having some good oils and having some good salts is a great first place to start. When it comes to fruits and vegetables, I can admit I don't have a ton of those in my pantry, mainly because I really enjoy having either fresh or frozen fruits or vegetables rather than canned. Really, it's just a textural preference for me. But canned fruits and canned vegetables are perfectly fine to be consuming if that is a type of produce that you enjoy. The two things to keep in mind would be making sure that the fruit that you're choosing that are canned are stored in water rather than in sugar. Sometimes there can be additional sugars added to some of these canned fruit. For the canned vegetables is making sure that it's not stored in salt, making sure it's just some water that it's stored in. That extra kind of salt and sugar really isn't quite needed, but can be used as more of a preservative in some of these canned fruit and vegetables. But some other types of fruit that you might notice that are in some people's pantries that I seem to run out of are things like dried fruits, things like raisins, cranberries, apricot, or even trail mixes as well. Those are really quick types of fruit that you can be having in your pantry that can be used either as part of a snack or even in your breakfast. If you enjoy having it lunch and dinner, perfectly fine, especially if you want to add it on top of your salads or adding a little bit of sweetness to some of those cooked dishes. If you enjoy having dried fruit, I often used to purchase this in bulk pre-COVID when bulk items were really accessible and easy to be able to grab. It's so much more affordable and you can really help to reduce a lot of that plastic waste. And if you have the space, some miscellaneous items that you can also consider are things like your teas or coffees or other caffeinated beverages. Things like plant milks are another one. Go check out that plant-based milk video to see the ones that I usually choose. Some other things to consider are things like flour. I usually have some all-purpose flour as well as some whole wheat flour and other sorts of sweeteners if you enjoy them, things like brown sugars or white sugar as well. Having things like baking soda and baking powder are two other little essentials that often are used in some simple baking recipes that'll give you a huge opportunity to be able to make simple things like muffins or cakes or easy other breakfast or snack items that you may not be able to make if you didn't have those leavening agents. If you're wanting a more extensive pantry, fridge, and freezer list to be using as a template or a resource for yourself, stay tuned for the next video since I'll be sharing a downloadable list. So, what are some of the things that I eat most often in my pantry? The past couple months have been a little bit unique just because these are the main things that I've been rotating around. They include crackers, usually crackers and cheese for breakfast. My lunches and dinners are usually canned pasta sauce with white spaghetti, and a good chunk of the beverages I'm having are Coke. I try to have a little bit of water in that. I know, sounds pretty non-dietitian-y, but the reason for that is because
we're pregnant!
Well,
I don't know why I'm saying we're.
Yeah,
She's
I'm pregnant. He's not pregnant. You may have noticed there was a short little hiatus on my social as well as on my YouTube channel just because the past couple months have been a little bit difficult with some excessive amounts of nausea and difficulty just being able to do anything. But thankfully, my foods that I get to choose have expanded a little bit where I am incorporating some fiber-rich foods and some fruits and veggies. But I can admit, this is what I was eating for a solid probably month every single day. But yes, thank you so much for your patience. But Jason and I really want to share this fun news with all of you. Anything you want to say?
That I'm super excited. I can't wait, and I'm probably more excited than you are.
He definitely is. I'm sure I will get excited in the next few weeks or couple months once I feel a little bit better. But I am really happy to say that I'm feeling even that tad bit better to continue making these videos every few weeks. I want to wrap this up. I'm feeling miserable.
Sorry.
Like I said before, make sure you tune in to the next video to see all of my dietitian tips when it comes to things to have in your fridge and freezer. But thank you so much for watching. As per usual, click like and subscribe and make sure you hit the notifications to be able to receive.
Nobody understands what that means. Hit the notifications. What is that supposed to mean? How do you hit notifications?
So you'll be notified of the next video.
Video. Peace.
Bye. Jason's asking where the hype life is. The hype life was here 10 minutes ago.
Why'd you not film 10 minutes ago then?
Because I was setting it up. Somebody could have helped me set it up.
Why didn't you set it up the day before so you're always like ready? You should have the house ready to be filmed all the time.
We should do a scan through of what our kitchen looks like and how small it is. You're so ridiculous. Oh my God.
Yeah, you're struggling.
I'm struggling. But you know what, Jason? I got this.
It's true, actually. You got this.
Yeah, but
you're gonna kill it.
Dry heaving coming.
Let's dry heat first before you go back. Like, think about how amazing you usually feel from the dry heat. I'm trying to get her to work on a TikTok, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, he's really trying to push the TikTok on me. I might actually explore it once I'm being a little bit better.